Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper. Uncover hidden histories, lost artifacts, and ancient mysteries. Join us as we explore the past secrets. Subscribe and dive into history's untold stories. It is the most sacred and powerful object in the biblical world, a golden chest said to contain the Ten Commandments, capable of leveling armies and acting as a direct line of communication to God. Yet, for over 2,500 years, the Ark of the Covenant has been missing. Its disappearance has sparked endless theories, but two locations stand out: a small chapel in Ethiopia and the secret archives of the Vatican. Before we can begin the hunt for the Ark of the Covenant, we must first understand what it is we are searching for. This is not just a quest for a lost historical artifact or a chest of ancient gold. This is a search for an object believed to be forged by the hands of God Himself, a vessel of unimaginable power that sat at the very center of an entire civilization's faith. The story of the Ark is a story of miracles and terror, of divine presence and devastating silence. Its disappearance is not merely a historical footnote. It is the foundational mystery of the Abrahamic faiths, a profound absence that has echoed through millennia. To understand how it vanished, we must first journey back in time, to the windswept slopes of a sacred mountain, and then to the gleaming heart of a legendary temple in Jerusalem. The origin of the Ark is described in vivid detail in the book of Exodus. The scene is Mount Sinai, a desolate and imposing peak shrouded in smoke and fire. Here, the prophet Moses communicates directly with God, receiving a set of laws that would form the moral and spiritual foundation for his people, the Israelites. These laws, inscribed by the finger of God onto two tablets of stone, are the Ten Commandments. But God gives Moses more than just rules. He provides a precise and intricate blueprint for a sacred object meant to house these holy tablets. This object was to be the Ark of the Covenant. The instructions were explicit. It was to be a chest, or coffer, constructed from acacia wood, a hardy, durable timber that grew in the Sinai desert. It was to be overlaid, inside and out, with pure, beaten gold, a symbol of its sanctity and pricelessness. Its dimensions were specific: 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits in both width and height, roughly 4 feet long and 2.5 feet wide and tall. A golden crown or molding was to encircle its top. At its four corners, gold rings were to be attached, through which two long poles of acacia wood, also covered in gold, could be inserted. These poles were for carrying the Ark, and the instructions stated they were never to be removed. This was not an object to be touched by human hands. It was to be carried with reverence and distance, its sacred power too immense for direct contact. But the most awe-inspiring feature was to be its lid, known as the mercy seat. This, too, was to be made of solid gold. And from this lid, two magnificent golden figures were to be hammered out, one at each end. These were the cherubim, powerful angelic beings, their wings outstretched, arching over the mercy seat and towards each other. Their faces were to be turned downward, gazing upon the lid. It was in this space, between the wings of the cherubim, that God declared He would manifest His presence. He told Moses, "There I will meet with you," and from above the mercy seat, from between the two cherubim that are on the Ark of the Covenant, I will speak with you. The Ark was not just a container. It was a throne for the invisible presence of God on earth, a direct line of communication between the divine and the mortal. Once constructed, the Ark became the mobile sanctuary of the Israelites during their 40 years of wandering in the desert. It was the physical manifestation of God's promise, or covenant, to be with His people. And its power was said to be both terrifying and miraculous. According to the scriptures, when the Israelites carried the Ark to the edge of the Jordan River, the waters miraculously parted, allowing them to cross on dry land into the Promised Land. Later, during the siege of Jericho, the priests circled the city walls for 7 days, carrying the Ark before them. On the 7th day, at the sound of trumpets and a great shout from the people, the impenetrable walls of Jericho crumbled to dust. The Ark was a weapon of war, a divine force that leveled cities and struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. But its power was not to be trifled with. The stories are filled with cautionary tales. When the Philistines captured the ark in battle and placed it in the temple of their god, Dagon, they awoke the next morning to find their stone idol toppled on its face before the Arkansas. They set it back up, only to find it fallen again the next day, this time with its head and hands broken off. A plague of tumors and mice then ravaged their cities, a divine punishment so severe that the terrified Philistines returned the ark to the Israelites without delay. On another occasion, an Israelite named Uzzah, seeing the ark tilting on an ox cart, reached out his hand to steady it. The instant he touched the sacred chest, he was struck dead by God's power, a stark reminder that the ark's holiness was absolute and unapproachable. For generations, the ark remained the holiest object in Israel, sometimes housed in a temporary sanctuary, but always revered. This all changed around the 10th century BCE, with the rise of Israel's most famous king, David, and his son, Solomon. King David conquered the city of Jerusalem and made it his capital. One of his greatest ambitions was to build a permanent, magnificent home for the Arkansas. While David conceived the plan and gathered the materials, it was his son, Solomon, renowned for his immense wealth and wisdom, who brought this vision to life. Solomon's Temple, also known as the First Temple, was one of the architectural wonders of the ancient world. It was not a large building by modern standards, but its opulence was legendary. It was constructed with massive, perfectly cut stones and fragrant cedarwood imported from the forests of Lebanon. Its interior was adorned with intricate carvings of palm trees, flowers, and cherubim. And nearly every surface, the walls, the floors, the ceilings, the altars was overlaid with vast quantities of pure gold. The wealth invested in the temple was staggering, a testament to the peak of Israel's power and influence under Solomon. The temple was divided into three main parts: an outer courtyard, a main chamber known as the Holy Place, and, at its very heart, an inner sanctuary known as the Holy of Holies, or the Debir in Hebrew. This innermost room was a perfect cube, completely dark, without any windows. It was the most sacred space on earth, the symbolic dwelling place of God. And it was here, within the profound darkness of the Holy of Holies, that Solomon placed the Ark of the Covenant. It was placed beneath the wings of two enormous new cherubim, also carved from olive wood and covered in gold, which stood 15 feet tall and stretched from wall to wall. A thick, heavy veil separated this sacred chamber from the rest of the temple. Only one person, the high priest of Israel, was ever allowed to enter this room, and only on one day a year, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, to sprinkle the blood of a sacrifice and ask for God's forgiveness for the people. For nearly 400 years, the Ark of the Covenant rested in the silent, golden darkness of Solomon's temple. It was the anchor of the nation's faith, the unchanging symbol of God's presence, even as the kingdom outside the temple walls went through periods of turmoil, division, and war. It was the nation's most precious possession, a direct link to their miraculous origins. And then, in the pages of the Bible, it simply disappears. The story of its vanishing is inextricably linked to the tragic fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the very temple that was built to protect it. The golden age of Solomon did not last. After his death, the kingdom of Israel fractured into two, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, with Jerusalem as its capital. The following centuries were marked by political instability, idolatry, and the looming threat of powerful, expansionist empires rising in Mesopotamia to the east. First, the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom, and then, a new superpower emerged, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, under the rule of its most formidable and ruthless king, Nebuchadnezzar II. By the early 6th century BCE, Nebuchadnezzar had set his sights on the kingdom of Judah. His massive army swept through the region, conquering city after city. In 597 BCE, he laid siege to Jerusalem, captured its king, and deported thousands of its leading citizen soldiers, craftsmen, and officials to Babylon. He installed a puppet king on the throne and demanded heavy tribute. But the people of Judah resisted. A decade later, they rebelled against Babylonian rule, a fateful decision that would seal their doom. In 587 BCE, an enraged Nebuchadnezzar returned to Jerusalem with the full might of his army. This time, there would be no mercy. He laid a brutal siege to the city that lasted for over a year. The people inside starved, the defenses weakened, and finally, the Babylonian soldiers breached the walls. What followed was a wave of systematic and catastrophic destruction. The city was razed to the ground. The magnificent royal palace was burned. And Solomon's temple, the glorious house of God that had stood for 4 centuries, was plundered and set ablaze, its golden treasures melting in the inferno as its massive stone walls came crashing down. The remaining population was rounded up and marched into a long and bitter exile in Babylon. The age of the First Temple was over. The Bible, in books like 2 Kings and Jeremiah, provides us with a meticulous, almost accountant-like list of the treasures that Nebuchadnezzar's soldiers looted from the temple before they destroyed it. It reads like a heartbreaking inventory of a nation's soul. It mentions the great bronze pillars that stood at the entrance, the massive bronze basin known as the sea, the golden altar, the lampstands, the fire pans, the bowls, the censer severy sacred vessel, large and small, made of gold, silver, or bronze, was accounted for. The text is painfully specific, listing even the shovels and the snuffers. The Babylonians were thorough. They took everything of value. And it is here, in this detailed list of plundered treasures, that we find the heart of our mystery. One item, the most important and sacred item of all, is conspicuously, shockingly absent from the list. The Ark of the Covenant is not mentioned. There is no record of the Babylonian soldiers capturing it. There is no description of them breaking it apart for its gold. There is no mention of it being paraded through the streets of Babylon as a trophy of war, as one would surely expect for such a legendary prize. It is simply not there. In the most detailed account of the temple's destruction, the Ark has vanished without a trace. This silence is deafening. It is impossible to believe that the biblical scribes, who took such care to list every minor vessel, would have simply forgotten to mention the fate of the nation's most holy object. Its absence from the looting list is clearly deliberate. This has led to the only logical conclusion, a theory that has captivated scholars and adventurers for centuries. Someone must have moved the Arkansas. The priests of Solomon's temple, watching the unstoppable advance of the Babylonian army, must have known that the fall of Jerusalem was inevitable. They would have gone to any length to protect their most sacred trust from desecration. They must have undertaken a secret, desperate mission to smuggle the Ark out of the Holy of Holies and hide it somewhere safe, far from the grasp of Nebuchadnezzar's legions. This theory gains even more weight when we look at what happened next. Around 70 years after the destruction of the temple, the Babylonian Empire was itself conquered by the Persians. The Persian king, Cyrus the Great, issued a remarkable decree, allowing the Jewish exiles to return to their homeland and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. This new temple, known as the Second Temple, was built on the same holy site as the first. It was a moment of immense hope and restoration for the Jewish people. They rebuilt the altar, restored the sacred rituals, and reconstructed the holy place. But when they came to the innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, they were faced with a profound and permanent loss. The Ark of the Covenant was gone. It was not in the new temple. The Holy of Holies in the Second Temple was, for the entirety of its 500-year existence, an empty room. The physical throne of God was absent. This fact is confirmed by later historical sources, including the Roman historian Tacitus, who wrote about the Roman general Pompey entering the Holy of Holies in 63 BCE and being astonished to find it completely empty, containing no image of a god, a vacant space, and a naked sanctuary. The Ark was not recovered during the period of the Second Temple. It was not mentioned in the detailed accounts of the Maccabean revolt. And when the Romans, under General Titus, destroyed the Second Temple in 70 AD, they too found no trace of it. The Arch of Titus in Rome proudly displays the spoils from this final destruction, the Great Menorah, the silver trumpets, but again, no ark. The inescapable conclusion is that the ark disappeared sometime before the Babylonian invasion in 587 BC. It was hidden, and hidden so well that its location was lost even to the generations that followed. This act of preservation created the greatest archaeological mystery in history. Where did the priests take it? Did they hide it in a secret chamber beneath the Temple Mount itself, a labyrinth of tunnels and caves that exists to this day? This is a popular theory, but the site is so politically and religiously sensitive that extensive excavation is impossible. Did they smuggle it out of Jerusalem entirely? Perhaps they took it east, across the Jordan River, or south, into the harsh wilderness of the Judean desert, hiding it in a cave near the Dead Sea, much like the Dead Sea Scrolls were hidden centuries later. Or did they take it on a much longer, more audacious journey, far beyond the reach of the Babylonians and any future empires that might threaten Jerusalem? This possibility is what connects the ancient mystery to the modern world, leading to incredible claims from distant lands. The disappearance of the Ark from the pages of the Bible is not an ending. It is a beginning. It is the starting point of a 2,500-year-long search, a quest fueled by faith, legend, and the tantalizing possibility that the world's most powerful relic is not lost, but is merely waiting, in secret, to be revealed once more. The mystery born in the chaos of a falling Jerusalem now stretches across the globe, a silent question waiting for an answer. As the Ark of the Covenant vanished from the historical record in Jerusalem, a profound silence fell over its story in the Western world. For centuries, its fate was a question without an answer, a mystery confined to theological debate and whispered speculation. But while one part of the world was mourning its loss, another, far to the south, claims to have been celebrating its arrival. This is where the trail of the Ark takes a dramatic and unexpected turn, leading us away from the familiar landscapes of the Middle East, across the Red Sea, and into the rugged, mountainous highlands of Africa. Our destination is Ethiopia, an ancient kingdom with a history as rich and as deep as any in the world. And it is here, in this land of rock-hewn churches and ancient traditions, that we find the most compelling, detailed, and passionately defended claim for the Ark's current location. This is not a theory based on archaeological guesswork. It is a living faith, a national epic, and the very foundation of an empire. The Ethiopian claim is not a recent invention. It is a story that has been passed down for nearly 1,000 years, enshrined in the country's most important and sacred text, the Kebra Nagast, which translates to the glory of kings. This book is not just a collection of legends. It is the national saga of Ethiopia, the historical and religious justification for the authority of its emperors, and the definitive account of how the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Tablet as it is known in Ethiopia, came to reside in their land. To understand this claim, we must begin where the Kebra Nagast begins, with the legendary encounter between two of the ancient world's most powerful rulers, King Solomon of Israel and the Queen of Sheba. The story, as told in the Kebra Nagast, is a rich tapestry of romance, intellect, and divine providence. The Queen of Sheba, known in Ethiopia as Makeda, was the ruler of a wealthy kingdom in the south, believed to be modern-day Ethiopia and Yemen. She was a woman of immense intelligence, power, and curiosity. News of King Solomon's legendary wisdom had traveled across the trade routes, reaching her court. She heard tales of a king who could answer any riddle, solve any problem, and whose understanding of the world was a gift from God himself. Intrigued, and perhaps a little skeptical, she decided she must see this for herself. She embarked on a long and arduous journey, leading a massive caravan laden with gold, precious spices, and jewels, to test Solomon with her own difficult questions. When she arrived in Jerusalem, Solomon was captivated not only by her beauty, but by her sharp intellect. For months, they engaged in a battle of wits, a deep and philosophical dialogue. She posed her most challenging riddles, and he answered every one with ease and profound insight. She toured his magnificent palace and the glorious temple he had built, and she was awestruck by the order, wealth, and divine favor that surrounded him. She declared that the reports she had heard were not even half of the truth. A deep respect and a powerful attraction grew between them. According to the Kebra Nagast, before she was to depart for her own kingdom, Solomon, determined to have an heir from this remarkable woman, tricked her into spending the night with him. When Queen Makeda returned to Ethiopia, she was carrying Solomon's child. In time, she gave birth to a son, whom she named Menelik, meaning son of the wise man. He was raised in the royal court of Ethiopia, educated as a prince, and told of his noble lineage. He grew into a strong and intelligent young man who bore a striking resemblance to his famous father. This is the first crucial pillar of the Ethiopian claim, the establishment of a direct bloodline. The story of Menelik connects the Ethiopian monarchy directly to the sacred line of King Solomon and King David. This Solomonic dynasty would rule Ethiopia almost uninterrupted for nearly 3,000 years, ending only with the deposition of Emperor Haile Selassie in 1974. This lineage was not just a matter of political pride, it was a sacred trust, a belief that Ethiopia had inherited the divine covenant that God had made with David and his descendants. And the ultimate symbol of that covenant, they claim, was destined to follow the bloodline. The second part of the story details how that destiny was fulfilled. When Menelik reached manhood, he longed to meet the father he had never known. He traveled to Jerusalem, where he was welcomed with great honor by King Solomon. Solomon was overjoyed to see his son, and immediately recognized the resemblance. He lavished Menelik with gifts and treated him as a royal heir, teaching him the laws of Israel and the ways of its court. For several years, Menelik stayed in Jerusalem, but eventually his heart yearned for his homeland and his mother. He announced his intention to return to Ethiopia. Solomon, heartbroken at the thought of losing his son, reluctantly agreed. But he insisted that Menelik should not go alone. He decreed that the firstborn sons of all the high priests and nobles of Israel were to accompany Menelik to Ethiopia to help him establish a kingdom modeled on the wisdom and laws of Israel. This was to be a new Zion, a new Jerusalem, in the heart of Africa. The young nobles of Israel were devastated. They did not want to leave their homes and families to travel to a distant, foreign land. They gathered in secret, lamenting their fate. And in their desperation, they hatched an audacious plot, a plan so bold it would change the course of religious history forever. Their leader was Azariah, the son of Zadok, the high priest of Solomon's temple. He argued that if they were being forced to leave Jerusalem, they could not possibly leave behind the one thing that truly mattered, the presence of God himself. They could not leave behind the Ark of the Covenant. The young men devised a plan to steal the Ark and take it with them to Ethiopia. According to the Kebra Nagast, Azariah received a divine vision in which an angel gave him permission, assuring him that it was God's will for the Ark to leave a Jerusalem that was becoming corrupt and idolatrous, and to travel to a new, faithful kingdom. The plan was executed with cunning precision. Azariah, as the son of the high priest, had access to the temple. He had a carpenter construct a perfect replica of the Ark's wooden chest. Then, one night, under the cover of darkness, he and his conspirators entered the Holy of Holies. They removed the true Ark of the Covenant, with the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments still inside, and replaced it with the forgery. The real Ark was smuggled out of the temple and hidden with their caravan's luggage. The Kebra Nagast is clear on one point. Menelik himself was unaware of the plot. He was an innocent party, and the theft was carried out by his Israelite companions. When Menelik and his vast entourage finally departed from Jerusalem, they traveled with supernatural speed. The narrative says the Ark itself lifted them, carrying them as if on the wings of an eagle, allowing them to cover a journey of many months in just a single day. As they traveled, the conspirators confessed their deed to a stunned Menelik. At first, he was terrified, certain that God's wrath would strike them down for such a sacrilegious act. But when he saw the Ark with his own eyes and realized that they were being protected and guided on their journey, he accepted that it was indeed God's will. He joyfully embraced his new role as the guardian of the world's most sacred object. When they arrived in Ethiopia, the Ark was welcomed with immense celebration and reverence. Menelik became the first emperor of the Solomonic line, and the Ark of the Covenant, the Tablet, became the spiritual heart of his new nation. And there, the Ethiopians claim, it has remained ever since. This is the foundational story. But the Ethiopian claim is not just a dusty legend from an ancient book. It is a living, breathing tradition that has been maintained with unwavering conviction for centuries. And its focal point today is a small, modest city nestled in the northern highlands, Aksum. Aksum was once the capital of a mighty empire that dominated the trade routes between Africa, Arabia, and the Roman world. It was a center of power and wealth, and today, it is the holiest city in Ethiopia. The landscape is dominated by giant, mysterious granite obelisks, or stelae, remnants of its pre-Christian glory. But its true heart lies within a walled compound belonging to the Church of St. Mary of Zion. Within this compound, there are two churches, an older one, built in the 17th century, and a newer, grand cathedral built by Emperor Haile Selassie in the 1960s. But the attention of every pilgrim and every visitor is drawn to a third, much smaller building. It is a simple, square chapel surrounded by a high iron fence. It looks almost unremarkable, like a small treasury or storage building. This is the Chapel of the Tablet. And it is here, inside this humble structure, that the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church claims the original Ark of the Covenant is housed. The level of security and secrecy surrounding this chapel is absolute. It is the most sacred and closely guarded site in all of Ethiopia and perhaps the world. No one is allowed to enter. No president, no king, no religious leader, not even the patriarch of the Ethiopian Church, is permitted to cross its threshold. Access is granted to only one living person, a single, specially chosen monk known as the Guardian of the Arkansas. This monk is selected for his piety and virtue, and is appointed to this sacred duty for the rest of his life. From the moment he accepts the role, he can never again leave the chapel grounds. He renounces the outside world, his family, and all previous attachments. His sole purpose, from that day until his death, is to watch over the Ark, to pray before it, and to protect it. He lives in solitude, his food brought to him by an attendant. When he becomes old and feels his death is near, it is his responsibility to name his own successor from among the other monks at the monastery. This tradition has been unbroken for centuries. The guardian is a living link in a long chain of protectors stretching back, they believe, to the time of Menelik. When journalists or researchers have managed to speak with the guardian, usually shouting questions from behind the iron fence, his testimony is always the same. He describes the Ark as an object of immense, terrifying power, a fire from heaven. He speaks of the profound spiritual weight of his duty and the constant presence of God he feels inside the chapel. He is utterly convinced that the object he guards is the one true Ark, the same one built by Moses on Mount Sinai. But this is where faith collides with the demands of history and science. For all the power and sincerity of the Ethiopian claim, there is one insurmountable obstacle, a complete lack of verifiable proof. Because no one is allowed to see the Ark, no one can independently confirm its existence, let alone its authenticity. No photographs exist. No scientific tests have ever been conducted on the object or the chapel. The world must simply take the Ethiopian Church at its word. This has led to intense debate and skepticism from many historians and archaeologists. They ask a series of challenging questions. Is the Kebra Nagast a reliable historical document, or is it a work of political mythology, written in the 13th century to legitimize a new ruling dynasty by connecting it to the prestigious lineage of Solomon? This is a strong possibility, as it provided a powerful founding myth for the restored Solomonic line. Furthermore, critics point to the tradition of the Tabbatat, the plural of Tabbat, in the Ethiopian Church. Every single one of Ethiopia's tens of thousands of churches contains a tablet. This is a consecrated replica of the tablets of the Ten Commandments, usually a slab of wood or stone, which is kept in the church's own Holy of Holies. This tablet is what makes the church holy. Without it, the building is just a building. It is entirely possible, skeptics argue, that the object in the Aksum Chapel is simply the most ancient and revered of these tabbatat, a relic of immense national importance whose story has, over the centuries, become conflated with the legend of the original Ark. Yet, those who have spent time in Ethiopia and spoken to its people often come away deeply impressed by the conviction they witness. The belief in the Ark is not a fringe idea, it is a central tenet of their national identity. They point to circumstantial evidence to support their claim. For instance, there was a significant Jewish presence in Ethiopia from ancient times, known as the Beta Israel. It is plausible that these communities brought traditions and perhaps even important relics with them from Jerusalem. They also point to the fact that the Ark's last mention in the Bible coincides with the reign of King Manasseh of Judah, a notoriously idolatrous king who desecrated Solomon's temple. This would have provided a powerful motive for faithful priests to smuggle the Ark away to a safer, more devout kingdom, and Ethiopia, with its ancient Jewish connections, would have been a logical destination. The story has also been tested by fire. In the 16th century, Ethiopia was invaded by the armies of Ahmed Guri, a sultan who sought to forcibly convert the Christian kingdom to Islam. His forces swept through the country, burning monasteries and churches to the ground. They destroyed the original church of St. Mary of Zion in Aksum. Yet, the Ethiopian chronicles state that before the invaders arrived, the priests of Aksum secretly moved the Ark to a hidden location, possibly a remote island monastery on Lake Tana, and kept it safe until the threat had passed. They protected it with their lives. More recently, during the political turmoil and civil war of the 20th century, the guardians of the Ark have reportedly stood their ground against armed soldiers, refusing to abandon their post. This is not the behavior of people guarding a mere symbol. It is the act of those who believe they are protecting the most sacred object on earth. And so, the Ethiopian claim leaves us at a fascinating impasse. It is a story that cannot be proven, but it also cannot be definitively disproven. It exists in a space between history and faith. There is no archaeological evidence, no textual proof outside of their own traditions, no way to scientifically verify the object in the chapel. But what does exist is a powerful, unbroken, 3,000-year-old cultural memory. There is the profound testimony of the guardians, the unwavering faith of millions of people, and a national epic that has shaped the identity of a nation. Is it possible that the priests of Solomon's temple, seeking a safe haven for the Ark, entrusted it to a faithful community far to the south? A community that has honored that sacred trust with absolute dedication for millennia, protecting the Ark by shrouding it in a veil of secrecy so complete that it has become a matter of pure belief? For the people of Ethiopia, this is not a question. It is the truth. For the rest of the world, it remains one of the most compelling and enduring chapters in the long, mysterious search for the lost Ark of the Covenant. The Ethiopian claim to the Ark of the Covenant is a powerful narrative, a story of faith and sacred duty passed down through generations. It offers a complete, self-contained explanation for the Ark's disappearance from Jerusalem and its continued existence in the modern world. But it is a story that exists almost entirely outside the verifiable record of Western history. To explore the other major theory, we must return to the turbulent lands of the Middle East and follow a different path, one not of faith, but of conquest, power, and secrets. This path leads us directly to the heart of the empire that succeeded all others in the ancient world, Rome. And from Rome, it leads us, once again, behind the high walls and locked doors of the Vatican. This theory posits that the Ark is not being protected by a solitary monk in a remote chapel, but that its fate is a secret held within the world's most powerful religious institution, a secret born from the ashes of a burning temple. To build this case, we must fast forward through several centuries of history from the time the Ark first vanished. The Babylonians destroyed Solomon's temple in 587 BC, but their empire was short-lived. They were succeeded by the Persians, who were then conquered by Alexander the Great and his Greek successors. Throughout this period, Jerusalem and the land of Judea were passed from one empire to another. The Second Temple was built, and Jewish life was re-established, but always under the shadow of a foreign power. And then came the Romans. By the 1st century AD, the Roman eagle had cast its shadow over the entire Mediterranean, and Judea was a restive, volatile province on the eastern fringe of its vast empire. The relationship between the Roman occupiers and the Jewish people was fraught with tension. Roman governors were often corrupt and insensitive to Jewish religious laws, while Jewish society was simmering with revolutionary zeal, with various factions advocating for a violent rebellion to throw off the Roman yoke. In 66 AD, the simmering tensions finally boiled over into a full-scale revolt. The Jewish rebels achieved some early, stunning successes, even managing to annihilate a Roman legion. This was an intolerable insult to the might of Rome. The Emperor Nero dispatched his most capable general, Vespasian, to crush the rebellion with overwhelming force. For the next 4 years, the Roman war machine methodically advanced through the country, laying waste to towns and fortresses. By the year 70 AD, the rebellion had been pushed back to its final stronghold, the city of Jerusalem itself. Vespasian had returned to Rome to become emperor, leaving the final phase of the war to his son, the ambitious and ruthless general, Titus. What followed was one of the most brutal and horrific sieges in ancient history. Titus surrounded Jerusalem, cutting off all food and water supplies. The suffering inside the city was unimaginable. The Jewish historian Josephus, who was an eyewitness to these events, describes the city descending into madness, with starvation, disease, and internal fighting claiming hundreds of thousands of lives. Finally, the Roman legions breached the city's formidable walls. They poured into the streets, slaughtering anyone they found. Their ultimate target was the Temple Mount, the sacred platform where the magnificent Second Temple stood. This temple, lavishly rebuilt by King Herod the Great, was a source of immense pride and the center of Jewish identity. The Roman soldiers, enraged by the fierce resistance, fought their way into the temple courtyards. Despite what some sources say were Titus's orders to spare the sanctuary, a soldier threw a torch into the sacred building. The ancient, dry cedar wood ignited instantly, and the entire structure was consumed by a hellish fire. The Second Temple, like the first, was utterly destroyed. This event was a cataclysm for the Jewish people, but for Rome, it was a monumental victory. And like all Roman victories, it had to be celebrated with a triumph, a grand parade through the streets of Rome to display the spoils of war to the cheering crowds. The treasures looted from the Jerusalem temple were the star attractions of Titus's triumph. And we know exactly what these treasures looked like because they were immortalized in stone. On the Arch of Titus, which still stands in the Roman Forum today, there is a famous and incredibly detailed relief panel. It vividly depicts a procession of Roman soldiers carrying the sacred objects of the defeated enemy. We can clearly see them holding the great 7-branch menorah, the golden table of showbread, and the silver trumpets that were used to call the faithful to prayer. This carving is a priceless historical document. It is a snapshot of the spoils of war, a visual confirmation of the treasures taken from Jerusalem. And once again, just like in the Babylonian looting list from 6 centuries earlier, one object is conspicuously absent. There is no depiction of the Ark of the Covenant on the Arch of Titus. This fact is often used to support the theory that the Ark was already long gone, perhaps hidden in Ethiopia or elsewhere, centuries before the Romans arrived. And this is a very strong argument. However, the Vatican theory offers a different interpretation. It asks us to consider the unique nature of the Ark and why the Romans, if they had found it, might have treated it differently from all the other treasures. Let's imagine a scenario. What if the Ethiopian story is a legend? What if the priests of Solomon's temple did not smuggle the Ark to a distant land, but instead hid it in a secret chamber deep beneath the Temple Mount? This is a plausible idea, as the ground beneath the platform is known to be riddled with cisterns, tunnels, and vaults. The priests could have hidden the ark there, with the intention of recovering it once the Babylonian threat had passed. But perhaps the secret of its location was lost during the 70-year exile. The priests who hid it may have died without passing on the knowledge. So, the ark remained hidden, its existence unknown, even as the Second Temple was built directly above it. It lay sleeping in the darkness, a forgotten secret beneath a new sanctuary. Now, fast forward to 70 AD. The Roman soldiers are not just looting the temple, they are systematically dismantling it, stone by stone. Josephus tells us they level the entire city, leaving almost nothing standing. In such a thorough and destructive process, is it not possible that they would have stumbled upon a hidden chamber? A secret vault that had been sealed for centuries? If they had broken through a wall or a floor and found, in the darkness, a golden chest flanked by winged figures, what would they have done? This is where the second pillar of the Vatican theory comes into play, the Ark as the ultimate trophy of war. The menorah and the other temple vessels were symbols of the Jewish faith, but the Ark was something more. Legends of its power were well known throughout the ancient world. It was the throne of the Jewish god, an object of immense mythic and psychological power. For the Romans, who were masters of psychological warfare, capturing the enemy's most powerful god symbol was the ultimate act of conquest. It was a demonstration that their gods were superior. But an object of such legendary power would not have been paraded through the streets like a common piece of furniture. It would have been far too significant, perhaps even considered too dangerous, to be put on public display. It would have been a top-tier imperial secret, the personal prize of the emperor himself. Titus would have taken it back to Rome, not for his public triumph, but for the imperial treasury or a private vault within his palace on the Palatine Hill. It would have been studied, catalogued, and then secured, its existence known only to a very small circle of the emperor's most trusted advisors. The silence about its capture would not be evidence of its absence, but proof of its immense importance. It was hidden from public view because it was the greatest secret of the entire war. So, let's assume this scenario is true. The Ark of the Covenant is now in a secure vault in Rome in the late 1st century AD. For the next few centuries, it remains a secret treasure of the emperors. But, as we know, the Roman Empire did not last forever. By the 4th and 5th centuries, the empire was in decline. The city of Rome itself was sacked multiple times by invading tribes like the Visigoths and the Vandals. These invasions were catastrophic. The invaders looted palaces, temples, and wealthy homes, carrying off centuries of accumulated treasure. It is during this chaotic period that the Ark could have met one of several fates. It might have been discovered by the invaders and destroyed for its gold, its true identity unknown to them. It might have been carried off to some unknown location in Germania or North Africa, where it was lost forever. This is a highly probable end to the story. But there is a third possibility, one that forms the final and most crucial link in our chain of reasoning. What if the Ark was saved? In the collapsing world of pagan Rome, what was the one institution that had the stability, the organization, and the foresight to preserve ancient treasures? It was the rapidly growing Christian church, centered around its leader, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome. This brings us to the final pillar of the theory, the Ark as a secret inherited by the Vatican. As the Roman state disintegrated, the Church was its logical successor. It inherited not just its spiritual authority over the people of the city, but also many of its physical assets and, most importantly, its secrets. Church leaders would have understood the immense significance of the Ark of the Covenant. It was a holy object from the Old Testament, a precursor to their own faith. They would have seen it as their sacred duty to protect it from the barbarian hordes desecrating the city. It's entirely conceivable that, in the chaos of a city under siege, the Ark was secretly moved from an imperial vault to a secure location under the Church's control. A place like the Lateran Palace, the Pope's residence at the time, or perhaps even into the catacombs and tunnels that ran beneath the city. It would have become the ultimate secret of the early Church, a relic of such profound significance that its existence had to be concealed, not just from enemies, but from the faithful themselves. Why would they continue to hide it? As the Church grew into the dominant power of the Middle Ages, why not reveal the Ark and use it as a powerful symbol of their connection to the biblical past? The answer lies in the complex politics of religion and the control of history. Revealing the Ark would have created immense problems. Firstly, it was and is the most sacred object of the Jewish faith. For the Christian Church to claim possession of it would have created a theological and political firestorm that continues to this day. It would be seen by many as the ultimate symbol of appropriation and supersessionism, the idea that Christianity had replaced Judaism. It would be a source of endless conflict. Keeping it hidden was, in a sense, the path of least resistance. Secondly, the Ark represents a different kind of faith, a different kind of relationship with God. The Old Testament God who spoke from the Ark was a God of power, of terrifying majesty, of specific laws tied to a specific people. The New Testament message of Christianity was one of universal grace, of a God made flesh in Jesus Christ. The physical presence of the Ark, the direct, localized throne of God, could be seen as a theological challenge to the more abstract, universal nature of the Christian faith. It was a relic from a past covenant, and its reemergence could complicate the message of the new one. And finally, there is the simple, pragmatic issue of control. To possess a secret of this magnitude is to possess a unique form of power. The Vatican has, for centuries, positioned itself as the supreme authority on Christian history and doctrine. The knowledge of the Ark's location, or possession of the Ark itself, would be a card to be held, not played. Its existence could be used as leverage, a source of ultimate authority to be hinted at but never revealed. The secret itself becomes the source of power. So, where would it be today? If this theory holds true, the Ark of the Covenant would likely be in the most secure and inaccessible place on Earth, the Vatican's secret archives or a hidden vault connected to it. As we've discussed before, this is not just a library, it's a fortress of history. If the Ark, or even just a definitive Roman record detailing its capture and fate, was absorbed into the Vatican's collections, it would be protected by layers of security and secrecy built up over a millennium. It would be the deepest secret in a vault of secrets. Some have even pointed to specific locations. There is a persistent rumor that the Ark is hidden in the vast, unexcavated catacombs that lie directly beneath St. Peter's Basilica itself. Others claim it is at the Basilica of St. John Lateran, which is the official cathedral of Rome and the Pope. This church has its own long and complex history and is said to contain numerous high-level relics. The theory suggests that during one of the church's many reconstructions, a secret vault was created to house the Ark, its location known only to a handful of successive popes. This entire theory is, of course, speculative. It is a chain of what-ifs. There is no direct proof, no leaked document, no deathbed confession from a Vatican official. It is a case built on circumstantial evidence, the historical fact of Rome's looting of Jerusalem, the plausibility of the Ark being a secret imperial treasure, and the Vatican's historical role as the inheritor of Roman secrets. But unlike the Ethiopian claim, which is shrouded in a faith that cannot be questioned, the Vatican theory is a puzzle that could, in theory, be solved. The evidence, if it exists, is physical. It is a document on a shelf or an object in a vault. And so we are left with two starkly different narratives. One is a story of unbroken faith, of a sacred trust carried to Africa and protected by a lineage of devoted guardians. The other is a story of brutal conquest, of a secret carried to Europe and protected by a lineage of powerful pontiffs. One is a secret kept out of reverence, the other, a secret kept out of a desire for control. Both theories are compelling, both are unproven, and both lead us to the same conclusion. The world's most legendary lost artifact may not be lost at all. It may simply be hidden, waiting behind a chapel door in Ethiopia or a vault door in Rome, its silent presence continuing to shape the world, whether we know it is there or not. The trail of the Ark of the Covenant leads us to two profoundly different conclusions: a story of unwavering faith guarded in an Ethiopian chapel, or a tale of conquest and control with a secret locked away in Rome. Whether it is protected by a solitary monk or described on a forgotten document in the Vatican, the Ark remains the ultimate lost relic, its power matched only by the mystery of its location. Thanks for exploring with Ancient Relics Keeper. What mystery should we unravel next? Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Let's keep digging into history's secrets together.